Okay, great. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today with you. I've been in before, so you probably know. My name is Jana Brogan, and I am a recently graduated herbalist from a Western Therapeutic Herbalist program at the Institute of Traditional Medicine in Toronto, which is a very intensive 2.5 year to 3 year course. I graduated in August, which means I'm moving from a space of books and on screen learning to the real world and making my way to the forests and fields and acquainting myself with the flora in a different way. My business is called Sage Rosemary Holistic because it is a holistic practice and it encompasses my practice of therapeutic herbalism, death doula, and Reiki practitioner. And they are all three modalities that are related, as most things are in this life death continuum that we live in. I guess today we're going to talk about wild crafting, which is like foraging, but it's slightly different. And herbalists call it wild crafting. And it's obviously something that people have been doing since time immemorial and going out and collecting herbs for medicine. Now, medicine is a very encompassing word, and coming from a holistic practice, it means many things. And there are many kinds of medicines that we can garner from our excursions to the forest. One of them, of course, is just the experience of being in the forest and being interacting with nature and the natural world. And that is, I mean, now there are all kinds of research papers now and documented proof, what we've always known, that the forest is medicine to us, and nature, just being in nature's presence and forest bathing and picking up on all of the beautiful and healing energies from our plant allies and the earth, is very, very beneficial to us. And then you throw in the actual physical activity that you are getting when you're out walking through the forest and bending and digging and picking and reaching, and that is a medicine. And there is also medicine in the form of food. And many medicinal herbs also have value for their mineral content, their vitamin content. And I like to say in my practice that kindness is the first medicine and food is the second medicine. And after that, we move to herbs for phytomedicine. But if we can incorporate as many herbs into our culinary practices and use them in our daily life and incorporate them just as we would, bread or potatoes, then we don't really, then the need to focus on taking specifics to heal ailments becomes secondary because we're using herbs as preventative medicine, and then there is actually the phytomedicine, or the medicine that comes from the herbs. And in that regard, there's more than we look at two areas, and they're both traditional. There is the biochemical constituents of the plants. Those are the chemicals in the plants that create certain reactions within our body and interact with certain systems. So traditionally, people have always known how plants work. But for a long time, herbalism was illegal. It was then considered to be, like hokum. It was just all hippie, sort of hippie approach to life. And there was no credence given to the medicinal property of plants for a very long time. And now science backs the tradition, which is very fascinating. And it continues to amaze me that, what people have known intuitively for so long and through trial and error and practice and tradition, science now proves it. And how did people know this, and how did people arrive at this intelligence? It just, to me, is just so amazing as I've studied, the mechanisms of action within the body and how complicated it is, and how complicated interactions are between different herbs. And it's just so phenomenal that people know how to do this. So there are the biochemical constituents in plants that work within our bodies. And as I've mentioned, then there are the vitamins and the minerals which work within our bodies, but there is also the energetics of the plants. And I don't know if anyone's familiar with like the Bach flower remedies. Has anyone ever used any Bach flower remedies? The
No.
like, rescue remedy, or they sell them at the health food stores, and they're a long-standing tradition too. And I have to tell, so it's more along the lines of homeopathy than herbalism per se, but it isn't homeopathy, and we do practice it as herbalists. And it is really using the energetic medicine of the plant, which is different than the biochemical constituents of the plant. And when I first studied it in school, I thought, well, this is a really lovely thought. Like, it's just such a beautiful thought. I'm going to use the energetics of the plant as medicine. But I really have to admit that in my deepest heart, I kind of thought, yeah, but then let's get back to the science of it all. This is interesting and fun, and it's really beautiful, but I'm not sure that I'm convinced that this is like really hard acting medicine. And the process of making flower essences is quite involved, and you have to do it before 10 o'clock in the morning. It has to be on a sunny day when the plants can sit in the sun. You have to have time you can't actually touch the flowers with your hands. You have to use leaves because you don't want to taint the energy of the plant. Um, you have to spend time with the plants. You have to, you can just sit with them, you can meditate with them, you can just whatever you feel moved to do in this time space you've created to make this medicine. And I use crystal bowls and spring water, because you want to use really, really clean water. And you collect the flowers from the plants or trees just when they're in bloom. You want them to be, at their freshest. And you float them in the water, and you let them sit in the sunlight all day. And then you take all of the material out of the water, and you're left with the water. And then this is a flower essence, and this is called the mother stock. And then you
Mm.
mix it in different proportions with brandy, into little vials, and it's the energetic medicine of the plant, which is, the properties are different than the biochemical properties of the plant. And so I was being graded on this, so I had to go through this process quite skeptically, I have to admit. And then I started taking the medicine. I formulated a medicine for myself, to help me remove some of my creative blocks. I was an artist for a long time and a writer, and then I just moved away from that and wasn't feeling, creative. I'd been in school for a year and a half, and so I mixed myself this flower essence with the essences of different flowers that were appropriate to what I was trying to facilitate within my energetic self. And I started taking it. And I mean, they're just drop doses. It's not like, you're drinking a shot of brandy. It's just like 5 little drops under your tongue 3 times a day. And I started, and the first day I was like full of energy. I was just so shocked. I was just like, okay, I've got all of this to do and so many things. And I was just really vibing on that. And day 2, I'm writing, and I'm brainstorming. I'm thinking, what the heck is going on? And then on day 3, I started to feel like my skin was too tight for my body. There was a shift trying to occur within me that was too much for me to even handle. And I was like irritable, and I was out of sorts. And I went, could this actually be that this plant medicine is doing something within me, these energetics? And so I dialed back my dosage and took fewer drops, and things I reached sort of an equilibrium. And I have to tell you, my teachers had in the past said, we don't use flower essences if someone is in a very vulnerable spot, because the medicine of the plants can be so potent. And I thought, yeah, whatever, okay, move along, move along. But I have to admit that it is incredibly powerful, these energetics that come from the plant. And it is the same energetics, if I think about it. These are the energetics. This is the medicine in the forest, the support that the earth and our plant allies offer us, that feeling that we get in the forest. That's what flower essences are distilled. And so, it's interesting because my program bridges science and tradition and brings it all together, and to start incorporating these different aspects of a plant into one medicine. So when I'm making tinctures, which are traditional alcohol extractions of the biochemical constituents, I'm now starting to add some of the energetics from the same plants, which is a really beautiful holistic medicine for people. And it's we are trained as patients and consumers. We are trained in the allopathic model of medicine, which is important. That's Western medicine. That's, we have our family doctors, we have our hospitals, we have our blood tests and our and diagnostic skills, and that's a very valid and important service in medicine to have. And I tell my clients, like, don't come to me if you're having a heart attack. I'm calling you an ambulance, and don't come to me if you're thinking of surgery, because I don't do that stuff, like, know when you need to go to whom, pick your practitioner. And of course, allopathic medicine is, essential for acute situations. And it's essential for, those emergency, pardon me, interventions. Herbal medicine is for more chronic conditions and preventative. Plant medicine doesn't work quickly, but it does work, and it's quite potent in how it works in the body, and can actually enter a cell and start to change things in the DNA and RNA. It's quite fascinating. But because we're trained and live in a Western model of medicine with allopathic medicine, we sometimes expect that is how medicine works, is the medicine such as we're given by the pharmaceutical companies. And that is one way to receive medicine, but there are many others. And it's interesting to note that in pharmaceuticals, in the Western model, what has happened over time is most of the medicines are based on plant medicine, on the original plant, like digitalis was used for heart, and foxglove, and all plants. And science studies the plants, and they identify what they think is a key component or constituent that facilitates the mechanism of action within the body. And then they isolate it. So they are taking components and constituents in isolation, and then they synthetically recreate it. But plants don't work in isolation, just like my ear does not work separately from my heart, works separately from my kidney. I am a closed system, and everything is working together. And every breath I take at a level that, it's impossible almost to wrap your mind around. And the same with plant medicine. A plant doesn't just have one biochemical constituent. Sometimes it has up to like 180, many of which science says we don't know how these are working yet. We haven't figured it out. But they work synergistically, and they're codependent, and they feed off each other. And so to remove one constituent from 180 and recreate it and think it's going to work the same way in a body that 182 biochemical constituents works is wrong thinking. It's not going to work like that. They work differently. So
is that Jana, would that be something like, for example, we are 30 to 40 trillion cells that make up who we are as one being. So, but they all work in concert, or they try their very best, if we cooperate, to work in concert. To, how does a cell know to be a heart, or how does an ear know to be an ear? So the other thing I wanted to ask is, I have this huge basil plant, and it's enough to supply all of Women 10. They got so much basil. And it's flowering. So would that flower be an essence? Is that would that end up?
You could use it as an essence
But
about
I
an
don't
essence.
really know the properties of that. That's the thing, right?
Then you have to learn them and do the research and figure out how you're going to engage with the plant to create an essence. And what's really interesting, to diverge a little bit from what I was just talking about, is that once we start to work with plants, so when I started studying herbalism, it was all about gathering and collecting and harvesting and drying and making. This year, I've actually done very little harvesting or collecting. I've just sat with the plants and worked with the plants as they're growing and enjoyed the plants and recognized the plants. And that's building relationships with the plants, which is different than just harvesting them, because they are life and they are living. And I'm sure there are so many gardeners amongst you. The feeling in the spring when you know your plants are going to be coming up, it's like greeting an old friend, and you wait to uncover them and the snow is leaving and you see them poking up, and it's that kind of excitement that you build and grow as you live with the plants. So as an herbalist, for me to work with plants that I know is much different than ordering a plant that I've never seen in the wild, that is not indigenous to this area, that I have no real understanding of, and using it as a medicine, because it moves me more into the space of allopathic medicine, which is fine, and we do it. And there are herbs that don't grow here, or herbs that I haven't worked with that my clients need, and that I know them scientifically. But I so much prefer to work with plants that I have grown with and developed relationships with, like Solidago canadensis, like goldenrod is one of my very favorite plants. And I literally have become that crazy woman in the forest talking to plants, and I greet them, and I'm just so, they once we develop these relationships with plants, it is, that is part of the medicine also. It's just incredible. And so to work with a plant that I know what it looks like when it's coming out of the ground. I've sat with it. I know what it looks like in the different stages of its life. I know it as I would know a friend. That kind of medicine is more potent, in my opinion, than medicine from a plant that I've never worked with. And it's an energetic, and it adds layers of healing to the process. So many of the plants that are, sort of maligned and discarded and not given credence in our daily city life, or even in our lawns, are really beautiful and potent medicines. And of course, I use dandelion as the one example that everyone can relate to. It is just such a total body tonic. So Taraxacum officinalis, which is dandelion in Latin, and we use Latin names because common names change from area to area, and it becomes very difficult to ensure that you're actually using the plant thinking you're using if you're not using the Latin name. So we train in the Latin name, and when we're writing our formulas, if we're making a tincture, we use the Latin name, and if we're making a tea, we use the most common name. And that's how, if an herbalist gave me formulas to create, or medicines to create, I would know from the way it was written if I was making a tincture or a tea, just as a little aside. But dandelion, the whole plant can be used, the flower, the leaf, the root. The root is specific to your liver and a hepatic. It is a hepatic tonic. And a tonic herb is an herb that is just bolstering, nourishing, and building, and safe to take for long-term use. And whenever possible, we use tonic herbs, as opposed to some of the heavy hitters. And some of the heavy hitters, you have to pulse them. That means you can take them for maybe 3 or 4 weeks, and then you take 3 or 4 weeks off, and then you do this dance with them, and you introduce other herbs in the interim. But dandelion is just a tremendous tonic. It's tonic for your liver. And we could all use a little extra liver love these days, because even with the cleanest lifestyle, we are inundated with toxins that we you can't really control. Like even walking through a grocery store down the aisle where all the laundry detergents are, we are being assaulted with chemicals that are impacting our liver. And our liver is like, I explain it like it's an Amazon warehouse. Everything coming into the body has to be sent through the liver eventually, and your liver sorts it and repackages it and redistributes it and decides where it's going. And it's a very busy place. And it's where phase 1 and phase 2 liver detoxification happens. And phase 2 is the methylation, and that's when an extra molecule is added to certain things so they can be excreted from the body. Like a water molecule is added, and then they can be these things, these hormones, these toxins can be excreted through feces or urine. But if our liver is bogged down with too many toxins, from our food, from the air we're breathing, from the laundry detergents, from the deodorant we're putting on our body, from, the glyphosate in our wheat, like all of it, then our liver can't juggle so many things and starts to drop. And what it often drops are the things that should be removed from our body, and they don't get methylated, and then we reabsorb them. And many of them are fat soluble and will go to our brain or other fatty organs and be stored there. A lot of women, a lot of the toxins are endocrine disruptors, and they disrupt our hormonal system, and we end up with hormonal imbalances because our liver is overwhelmed. So dandelion root, we need to be using dandelion root. When you're using roots, it's not as easy to infuse them. So an infusion is when we make a tea with just hot water and we cover it for 15 minutes and then we drink it. But roots and bark the biochemical constituents are harder to release. So we have to do what's called a decoction, which is you boil it. You bring it to a boil and boil it for 20 minutes. So dandelion root has to be decocted or roasted prior to using as a tea, so that you can quickly, it will release its medicinal properties. But it is just a fantastic tonic for the liver. And as it's a tonic for the liver, it's also a tonic for all things skin related, because our skin and our skin health is built from the inside out. And our skin is one of our major detox pathways. So if our liver is not doing its job, we start to see it in our skin. We start to see it with psoriasis, eczema, acne, cysts or boils. Those can all be indications that our liver needs a little extra love. And so the best way to do that is with a tonic like dandelion root. The leaf is tonic to the kidneys. And it's a natural diuretic. And in the infinite wisdom of nature, I don't know if anyone takes diuretics, but usually when you take diuretics, you have to take potassium because you start to deplete your potassium. But dandelion leaf is super high in potassium. So even though it's a diuretic, you're still getting the potassium you need, so you're in balance. And that is the intelligence of plants. And then the flower can also be used. There are phytonutrients in the flower and vitamins, and you can use it to make syrups. You can use it to make jellies. You can add flowers to your salads. You can eat dandelion. You can eat all of it. You can even roast the root and eat it if you wanted to. So it is a whole medicine, a whole food. And yet, for how many years did people spray their lawns to kill this medicine, and remove it from, like it's some kind of eyesore from our streets and our lawns, so there's so many beautiful little plants like that. Shepherd's purse, which is Capsella versus Pastora, which is a traditional woman's herb, and it's just superb for all things gynecological and menstrual related. Trifolium pratense, which is red clover, which is a natural phytoestrogen, so it's really good for menopause, but it's also a blood cleanser. It's high in minerals and vitamins. There is Plantago major, which is good old plantain, which is an amazing plant. And it's a really fantastic blood cleanser, lymphatic. blood cleanser. It's also, its superpower is drawing things out of you. So if you have a splinter or a bee sting or a wasp sting or a piece of glass, if you just make a poultice with plantain and slap it on there and cover it, it can draw just about anything out of your body. My partner, we have a hornet's nest on our front porch above it, but I didn't want to kill them and I wasn't sure how to get rid of them. So I just kind of ignored them. And one day he slammed the door coming out or something, and a couple of them got stuck in his collar, and he had multiple stings on his, like multiple. And I went and grabbed some plantain and, crushed it up. If you're by yourself and you're using it yourself, they suggest you just chew it up into a mash and apply it and hold it. I didn't chew it up because he's not into that kind of thing, but I chopped it as best I could and made a poultice and put it on him. And like within minutes, the sting is gone, the pain is gone, and he didn't even think about it after that, as opposed to my 8-year-old who got a sting when I wasn't home, and they just put whatever they had on it that wasn't plantain, but just like a topical pharmaceutical whatever, and it hurt and hurt and hurt. So I'm just constantly amazed at the magic and potency of plant medicine. There's, what other ones are there? I was actually up at the monastery trails, the Dave McKee trails, the other day, and there's a plethora of plants up there. I went to Laurier yesterday and found some. It's a funny time of year because things are dying down and it's not as easy to recognize, but there's still some New England aster. So those are the little purple asters, and they are phenomenal for respiratory ailments, cold and flu, and so is Solidago canadensis, which is goldenrod. So it's interesting. A lot of our fall plants are really beneficial to our respiratory system and to influenza and cold and flu season in nature's infinite wisdom. So there was lots of Solidago still, and I just wanted. Many people think they're allergic to goldenrod, and goldenrod is given a pretty bad reputation, and people can be allergic to it. It's part of the Asteraceae family, which is one of the most is the family where people are most likely to have allergies. But often when people think they're responding to goldenrod, it's actually ragweed, which grows usually right beside it and doesn't have showy flowers. So people blame goldenrod, because goldenrod is actually specific for allergies, allergic rhinitis, catarrh. So any disorder that's producing like lots of mucus and catarrh and affecting your respiratory system, goldenrod is beneficial for that. I found some elderberries in the Laurier woods, and elderberries are, like, I'm sure people have heard of elderberry or elderflower syrup, and it's a really good immune booster, immunomodulator. The syrup is great. Children love it for coughs and colds. And there was actually some really bad press for elderberry when COVID started, and herbalists were using it to treat COVID in the early stages. And there was some information that came out suggesting that the elderberries were causing cytokine storms within the patients, as we know, which can be a complication from COVID. But they've since disproved that is actually not what has happened. And so elderberry has been sort of reinstated as a safe herb to use for that kind of respiratory viral infection to help the immune system. I would like to say about wildcrafting, then it's very important on a few levels, what I'm saying. First of all, as an herbalist, I would never wildcraft to support my practice, because it's not a sustainable practice unless I'm collecting something like dandelion or raspberry leaf from like my mom's property. Where there is an overabundance of it, I would never presume to take from nature to support my practice, because it takes a great deal of plant to make a small amount of medicine, and the impact on the environment can be really immense. Right now, there are a number of Indigenous herbal plants in Ontario that are at risk and endangered. I don't use any, I won't use any at risk or endangered plants in my practice, even if I can buy them from a farm. It's just the wrong mindset to get into. What happens when things become trendy or popular, that this happens in the phytomedicine world also, and a new herb or a super medicine, and people start to want it and demand goes up, and people aren't always ethical in how they're harvesting it, or they're not harvesting it in a regenerative way, and we lose plants, and we put a great deal of stress on the communities, the traditional communities that rely on these medicines. And an example of this would be chaga, which is a great, like, it's such a great medicine, but it's not a medicine from my lineage. From my lineage, I'm I'm a settler on these lands. This isn't my land. And in my tradition, which is Scottish and Celtic, we didn't use chaga. And Indigenous communities still use chaga as a medicine, and they use it in ceremony. And I remember when I was in restaurant and chaga was being touted as this amazing medicine, which it is, and people were harvesting it, but they were just going into the forest without any idea of how long it takes chaga to grow, and the whole process, and how it's used properly, and how it's used in ceremony as well as medicinally. And they were just hacking it off trees and selling it, and then communities that rely on it would go to find it, and it wasn't there anymore. And so I always caution people when wildcrafting, to watch where you're walking, to know what you're collecting and understand its status, and know if it's a responsible choice, or if you should be buying it instead from someone who makes their livelihood growing it in a regenerative, organic fashion. It's also so important to know what is in the earth when you're collecting your medicines. Are there toxins in the earth? Because the worst thing we can do is make medicine and find out that it's actually poison, because plants absorb everything in the earth around them and in the water. And things like glyphosate, toxins like glyphosate, are water soluble, right? So we have to be so careful where we're collecting our plants from, to make sure that we're actually taking medicine and not poison into our systems.
Jana,
Yeah.
Jana, can we pause for just a moment and see if any of our members have a question to ask? Just
Yeah.
for a moment. And you mentioned glyphosate, and I'm sure Margie is on board, and Margie has mentioned to me that glyphosate is connected to Roundup.
It is Roundup.
It is Roundup, and that it is that I guess there's agencies that are trying to get approval to have more added or more of it in the use of it in the environment. And and it's connected to, I think it is connected to, there seems to be more prevalence of Parkinson's disease since that use has been,
and it has,
since it's been used in like Roundup.
Yeah, so it has, our status in Canada is in denoted amounts, it's considered safe, but it is a poison. And in my opinion, a poison is a poison. And that's what agencies who are fighting to have it removed are saying. It is poisonous, and it is. We're going to see a shift happening, because there was recently a lawsuit in the US where a groundskeeper, and it was like unprecedented. He was awarded a huge sum of money because they were able to prove that his lymphoma was caused directly from using Roundup. And once that happens in the States and lawsuits start happening, people start to pay attention. So not only is all of the wheat in Canada that is not organic treated with glyphosate, but our oats are also, unless they are organic, our oats have been treated with glyphosate. But now there are agencies, distributors in the US, who are saying, we don't want your oats if they've been treated with Roundup, because now there is culpability. Now there is accountability, because people are starting to sue and starting to get money from the settlement. So there will be a shift now that there's money involved, I think. The WHO has conceded that glyphosate is a likely carcinogen, which was a big step because before it wasn't considered. We want to see more happen in that regard. And as far as neurodegenerative diseases and disorders, there's a fantastic film. You can watch it on YouTube, I think. It's by Dr. Zach Bush, and it's called, what's it called? Eat, Dirt, and Thrive is what it's called. And he's like a many-lettered doctor. You know, he has like he developed chemotherapy. He actually works on putting together the different chemotherapies for different kinds of cancers, and he's very, very well educated. And he did a lot of studying of glyphosate and its cancer causing properties. But another thing glyphosate does is the epithelial cells in our digestive tract, and our digestive tract runs from our mouth to our anus, and it is only one epithelial cell thick. And it is so important. It's where our microbiome is, right? Our small intestine, that's where all of our bacteria, or most of our bacteria, live, that we are made up of, that are so important. But glyphosate can actually dissolve or weaken the tight junction cells that line our gut and leave little spaces. It's called hyperpermeability. So it increases hyperpermeability of our gut lining. And if you've heard of leaky gut, that is what they are speaking to. And it means that proteins and chemicals that are not supposed to enter into our bloodstream directly now have access. And again, some of them are fat soluble, some of them are water soluble, some of them wake up your immune system, where this issue with autoimmunity is happening because our body doesn't know what to do with these constituents that are now in our bloodstream that aren't supposed to be there. So it goes, our immune system wakes up and becomes hyperactive. But Dr. Zach Bush speaks to the increase. There's a parallel between the areas of the US where there's a high usage of glyphosate, and there's an increase in neurodegenerative diseases, and it just depends where it settles in your brain. Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, like it's a very frightening toxin, in my opinion.
Jana,
so, we have to be really mindful about and yeah.
I'm wondering if we could pause for just a moment and see if there are any questions from the group.
Sure.
Anyone? Yeah. Okay, Donna, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a lot of wild raspberry. So you said you can use the raspberry leaf to make a tea. Mm-hmm. So I could just pick the leaves and boil them?
Yeah, you can use them fresh or you can dry them. If you're drying herbs, it's always best to dry them. So my practice is I collect them, I leave them outside for a couple of hours to let all the little bugs make their way, back to the world so that I'm not bringing them into my house and killing them. And then if you're going to dry the leaves, you do it in a cool, dark place. One of the best practices, like out of sunshine, so you can tie up a bundle inside of a brown paper bag and hang it to dry. And once it's dry, you can use it. You can use fresh also when they're in season. And raspberry is like an amazing women's herb. It is full of vitamins and minerals and bone builders and essential minerals to our body. And it's also specific to women during their childbearing years. It's a uterine tonic. It's a tonic to the menstrual cycle and system. It was also used traditionally by midwives to strengthen the uterus during the last part of pregnancy and to tone it. So it is a tonic and tonifying herb. It's good for women of all ages, and you can also use raspberry leaf to make an acetum. So that's like that is a vinegar extraction. Instead of using alcohol to extract the biochemical constituents, you're using a vinegar. And that's a fun way to do it also. And then you can use it in dressings and just incorporate it into your daily practice of preventative and nourishing your body. But it's a lovely tea. It's almost like a black tea in its flavor. It's a darker, bolder taste than many herbs, and it works well with like oat straw. And I really like it with, I like it also with chamomile, because I find the raspberry leaf a little strong tasting for me. I don't drink a lot of black teas because I find the tannins sometimes bother me, but if I mix them, but yeah, it's a lot of fun to just start mixing your own herbs, your own tonic herbs, and finding blends that work for you.
Great.
Jana, we have some more questions. Susan Robinson.
Hi, good morning, Jana. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
This is very, very interesting. Jana, we've seen an increase of gluten intolerance and celiac disease over the last few years. And we've heard it's because the grains are just really overprocessed is why. But as you're talking about the glyphosates, I'm thinking, wait a minute. As a kid, I ate all this processed bread and everything else, and it never bothered me. But as an adult, certainly these grains did start to play with my system. So do you think it's more the chemicals now that they're using to grow these grains is really the culprit, as opposed to how they're, I'm sure processing it isn't great either, but I'm thinking that it's the chemicals that are the biggest culprit to this. So just your take on this.
So it is such a, like everything else, it is not just like one thing. It's like, how many pieces can we find to this puzzle? So celiac and gluten sensitivity are two different things. They both have genetic components, but as we learn through epigenetics, there are different things in life and different stressors, environments, toxins that can turn your genes on, right? And they start to express themselves as celiac or gluten sensitivity. That's one aspect. There can be a genetic component in how are our genes going to be expressed. Stress can impact how your genes are expressing. Diet, exposure to toxins can definitely interrupt and cause your genes to turn one way or the other. And then there is a component of autoimmunity involved in both of them. And glyphosate can cause autoimmunity. So it's like, how many pieces of the puzzle? How is our lifestyle contributing to it? How are we living? Are we living in rest or digest? Our parasympathetic nervous system? Are we fight and flight constantly in our sympathetic nervous system? And most of us in this day and age, and at the speed of light, and all of our responsibilities and commitments, and live and diet, coffee, stimulants, we live in our sympathetic nervous system. We live in our fight or flight nervous system, which causes chemical responses within our body, which causes disorder, right? And like, it can stem to the way that we're ingesting, digesting, assimilating, not assimilating. Like, how are we breaking down our food? How are we absorbing our food? Are we absorbing our food? What toxins are in our home? Like, what's in our laundry detergent? What's in our deodorant? What's in our toothpaste? And how is that disrupting the hormonal responses within my body that are needed to break down and secrete? Like, our bodies are so complicated, and the processes don't start and stop anywhere, which is, I'm just constantly amazed. There is no beginning or ending in the body. What we're trained to do as herbalists is not to look at the symptomology. We help address symptoms that are obviously troublesome and need to be addressed, but we try and get back to the root cause of disorder. And we look at things like, always, we look at diet, and nutrition. We look at lifestyle, and we also look at body systems. So when someone comes to us, and we don't diagnose, like I would never diagnose you with celiac, I would never diagnose you with gluten sensitivity, but I can say, well, clearly there's some inflammation in your body, and I understand what's happening. And then we look at how can we heal, how can we heal your body so that it can return to homeostasis and do what it's supposed to be doing, because your body knows what to do if we can get out of the way. And gluten on its own, regardless of anything else, is inflammation causing within the body. Aside from the toxins, aside from immunity, autoimmunity, but wheat is also a genetically modified crop. So depending on what your belief is about GMOs, I, as an herbalist, am against genetically modified crops for many reasons. One is that they are haven't been studied long enough. Two, using genetically modified crops has resulted in super bugs and super weeds that require further and further intervention with greater toxicity to modulate them and to shut them down. So some of the herbicides that they have to use on genetically modified crops now contain some of the constituents that were in Agent Orange. So it's like antibiotic resistance. Genetically modified organisms are causing us to have to use more and more toxins, which is depleting our soil. So, but it's also genetically modified organisms. Our body's not really sure what to do with them, and there's sorry.
Sorry, Jana, we only have 10 minutes left. Okay. I wanted to find out if there's another question.
Yeah, sorry if that didn't answer all of your question, but it's a really complicated topic with many different pieces to it.
Bonnie, did you have a question? No? Okay. Sorry if I interrupted there, but I just want to make sure the time, we have to go to Laurier Woods as well. So just for the membership, we're over 70 now. And just for you to know that you can access Earth in a Nest on the website, and Jana will be registered as a business on that website too. Jana, can you tell us what your plans are briefly for opening a location, or is it going to be in your home? Where's your practice going to be?
So my practice will exist in person, like face-to-face, as well as in a virtual space. So I'm just in the process of setting up an account with an encrypted space, which is completely like it's HIPAA compliant, which means medical information can be exchanged safely and confidentially in this format. Like it would be hard for me to do an intake on Zoom because it's not really secure. So I will have that space and we can meet virtually. I will also go to a client's home if they're more comfortable doing that. I prefer to see clients in person because I lose a set of diagnostic skills when I'm doing it virtually, but I can do it. We've learned how to navigate through that world in the last year and a half. So I see people that way. I also have as another modality that works well with herbalism, I offer traveling Reiki. So I bring all of my practice to your home and set up and do Reiki sessions in your home. And then I'm also available throughout it all to talk about death and the death doula practice, which I'm primarily an educator. Right now, I primarily just share information about that and hook people up with some information to help them answer questions. So that's how and I also am starting an apothecary, which means that you can, so when you see me as an herbalist and decide you need medicines, I make the medicines and I provide the medicines for you. And there's also going to be an opportunity for people to purchase medicines from my website. I have a website that's that is open. It's a work in progress, but I'm blogging there, and I have a few articles there, and I will have recipes, and it talks about what my prices are and what my practice will entail, and sort of my core beliefs and my mission statement are all listed on my my website, and that's just sagerosemaryholistic.com, and it's holistic with a W. So WHOLISTIC.
Okay. Any questions? Boy, sorry to put you on the spot there, Jana.
No.
But I thought this is relatively new to all of us. But it's so very, very interesting. And I look forward to having you on Earth in a Nest and having you back. You're coming back. I think, is it in October or?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're going to meet you at Laurier Woods in for 10:30.
Yeah.
If we
Which
could all-
park are you going to? Like the main parking lot?
Yes, the off Roulette Street.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
And any other thoughts? Anyone? Just wanted to tell everyone, if you check the weather forecast, you'll notice that we have a forecast for rain for the next 3 or 4 days. So we will be on Zoom for exercise. And there's one other event that's coming. Oh yes, book club tomorrow at 12:30, Jill. Okay. And Jana, thank you so much. I congratulate you. That was quite a haul, 2.5 to 3 years doing your certification. And I know we all look forward to find out more. It's awesome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Okay, we'll see you shortly.
See you at 10:30.